Hey guys, tonight we're exploring a story that everyone in history should know. The story is The Strange Unwritten Rules for Women Who Never Married. You get comfortable. Take a moment, like the video, and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Strange Unwritten Rules for Women Who Never Married. Imagine that the world has become wonderfully quiet. The busy sounds of today slowly drift away, replaced by the gentle crackle of a small fire and the distant ringing of an old church bell somewhere across a sleeping village. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and wood smoke. Above, countless stars rest peacefully over fields, forests, and rooftops that have witnessed centuries of ordinary lives. Tonight, you are not following the story of queens whose names filled history books, or noblewomen whose portraits still hang in grand halls. Instead, you find yourself walking beside women whose names were rarely written down at all. They left behind few letters, few paintings, and almost no monuments. Yet they were everywhere. Some never married because they chose a different life. Others hoped for marriage that never came. A few devoted themselves to faith, family, business, or craft. Many simply accepted the path that unfolded before them, adapting with quiet strength to a society that often measured a woman's worth by whether she became someone's wife. As we travel gently through history together, you may discover that these women lived under a remarkable collection of unwritten rules. They were rarely carved into stone or recorded in official law. Instead, they lived in conversations, raised eyebrows, shared expectations, and traditions passed quietly from one generation to the next. These invisible customs could shape an entire lifetime. Picture yourself arriving in a small European village during the late Middle Ages. Dawn has only just begun to brighten the eastern sky. Thin ribbons of mist lie across nearby fields, while chickens scratch softly beside wooden cottages. A baker has already begun preparing bread, and the warm smell of fresh loaves drifts through narrow streets. Life here moves according to familiar rhythms. Bells announce prayer, market days, weddings, harvests, and funerals. Every person seems to know where they belong. Or at least, most of them do. Among the villagers lives a woman, perhaps in her early 30s. She owns neither a grand house nor expensive clothing. Her dress is carefully mended, her apron clean despite years of work. She greets neighbors politely each morning and carries a woven basket to the market. She is never married. No one openly insults her. Few speak harsh words directly to her face. Yet almost everyone quietly notices. In many communities throughout medieval and early modern Europe, marriage was not simply considered a personal choice. It was viewed as the natural order of adult life. Families expected it. Churches encouraged it. Neighbors assumed it would happen. A woman remaining unmarried beyond what others considered the usual age often became something unusual, without intending to. She became someone who invited questions. Imagine how many conversations quietly began after she walked away. I wonder why. Perhaps she refused someone. Perhaps no one asked. Perhaps she is caring for her parents. No single explanation satisfied everyone's curiosity. These conversations were rarely cruel by themselves. Instead, they reflected a society deeply interested in fitting every person into familiar patterns. Those patterns brought comfort because they made the world seem understandable. Marriage connected families, organized property, created households, and ensured that children would continue family lines. When someone remained outside that pattern, neighbors naturally wondered how she fit into the larger picture. One of the first unwritten rules was surprisingly simple. Do not draw attention to yourself. An unmarried woman often discovered that modesty offered protection. Bright clothing might attract whispers. Frequent laughter with unfamiliar men could become village gossip. Traveling alone too often invited questions. Even standing too confidently during public gatherings sometimes encouraged unnecessary attention. None of these actions were illegal, yet they quietly challenged expectations. So many unmarried women learned to become almost invisible. They dressed neatly, but modestly. They spoke kindly, but carefully. They attended church faithfully. They avoided unnecessary disputes, not because they lacked confidence, but because peace often came through quiet respectability. Picture yourself walking beside one of these women through a village market. Merchants arrange vegetables upon wooden tables. Wool traders unfold cloth woven during the winter months. A blacksmith's hammer rings softly from across the square. Children chase one another between market stalls, while dogs sleep beneath wagons. Everyone seems busy, yet nearly everyone notices everyone else. Small communities possessed remarkable memories. They remembered who borrowed grain during difficult winters. They remembered whose roof leaked after autumn storms. They remembered weddings from decades earlier, and they remembered who had never married. This memory was neither entirely good nor entirely bad. Sometimes it created trust. Sometimes it created suspicion. Most often, it simply became another fact woven into village life. Another unwritten rule slowly revealed itself. Become useful. If marriage traditionally defined adulthood, usefulness offered another respected path. Many unmarried women became extraordinary workers. Some mastered spinning wool into fine thread. Others became skilled weavers. Some brewed ale admired throughout their village. Others cared for elderly parents whose strength slowly faded. Many served as midwives, herbal healers, household managers, teachers of young children, or assistants in family businesses. Their work quietly earned respect. In many towns, neighbors soon realized something important. Although a woman might never become a wife, she could still become indispensable. Imagine entering a small cottage during early evening. The fire burns steadily inside a simple stone hearth. Bundles of dried herbs hang from wooden beams overhead. A spinning wheel turns rhythmically as an unmarried woman works patiently beneath candlelight. Outside, gentle rain taps against the roof. Inside, everything feels calm. Her hands move almost without thought after years of practice. Twist, pull, wind, again. Thread slowly gathers onto the spindle. Hours pass peacefully. This quiet labor supported countless households throughout history. Textiles required enormous amounts of time before factories transformed production centuries later. Spinning, weaving, sewing, repairing clothing. These ordinary skills held genuine economic value. An unmarried daughter often contributed significantly to her family's income through such work. Sometimes, her earnings even helped younger brothers or sisters marry. In this quiet way, women who never married often strengthened families without receiving much public recognition. The work itself became their reputation. Another unwritten expectation gently shaped everyday life. Protect your family's honor. Family honor meant many things depending upon place and century. It included honesty, reliability, religious devotion, good manners, financial responsibility. For unmarried women especially, reputation became one of the most valuable possessions they owned. Unlike jewelry, it could not be locked safely inside a chest. Unlike land, it had no visible boundaries. Yet once damaged, restoring it proved extremely difficult. So daily life required careful choices. Greeting neighbors politely, paying debts honestly, keeping promises, avoiding unnecessary arguments, speaking thoughtfully. These ordinary habits quietly built trust over many years. Picture yourself following an elderly unmarried woman through winding streets as morning sunlight slowly warms old stone walls. Children wave happily. Shopkeepers smile with genuine affection. A young mother asks for advice about preserving vegetables before winter. An aging widower tips his hat respectfully as they pass. This respect did not appear overnight. It grew through decades of dependable character. Not every unmarried woman received such kindness. History was never so simple. Some suffered loneliness. Some experienced poverty. Others became targets of gossip, despite living honorably. Yet many earned deep community respect, precisely because they remained steady, dependable, and generous throughout changing seasons of life. As the morning slowly arrives, the village becomes brighter. Windows open. Laundry flutters gently in fresh air. Some families prepare for weddings. Others mourn recent losses. Life continues as it always has. And among these ordinary moments, countless women quietly write histories that official records rarely notice. Their names may have faded from memory. Their homes may have disappeared long ago. But their patience, resilience, and quiet dignity still echo through the centuries. Our gentle journey has only just begun. Soon we will wander beyond village lanes into bustling medieval towns, peaceful convents, growing marketplaces, and family homes, where even more unwritten rules shaped the lives of women who never married. For now, let the evening grow softer once more, and allow these quiet footsteps from the past to fade gently into the comforting silence before our story continues. The first light of another day arrives quietly over the countryside. A pale mist still rests across the meadows, and the grass glistens with tiny drops of dew. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster calls to greet the morning, while the gentle murmur of a nearby stream carries through the cool air. Imagine taking another slow step along the narrow path, leaving the familiar village behind as the road leads toward a larger medieval town. The journey is peaceful. Wildflowers sway gently beside the track, and tall oak trees provide welcome shade as birds begin their morning songs. Wooden carts creak softly as merchants make their way toward the market, their horses moving at an unhurried pace. The world feels patient, as though it has all the time it needs. You find yourself walking beside an unmarried woman named Agnes. Her name is ordinary for her time, just as countless other women bore it across England, France, and parts of Northern Europe. She carries a simple basket covered with linen. Inside are neatly folded pieces of cloth she has woven during the previous weeks. Agnes has traveled this road many times. She knows where the ground becomes uneven after heavy rain. She knows which farmhouse keeps friendly dogs and which bridge offers the best view of the river below. Every journey has become familiar, yet she never rushes. Life itself moves slowly here. As the town walls come into view, the sound of daily life gradually grows louder. Church bells ring to announce the beginning of the day. Blacksmiths begin heating their forges. Bakers slide fresh loaves from great stone ovens, filling the streets with the comforting smell of warm bread. The town is larger than the village we left behind, yet its people remain just as observant, perhaps even more so. In towns, strangers arrive every day. Merchants, travelers, priests, craftsmen, and pilgrims pass through the gates. Yet among the permanent residents, everyone still notices familiar faces, especially those who have remained unmarried year after year. Unlike villages, towns often offered opportunities that could not easily be found in the countryside. There were guilds, workshops, marketplaces, and growing trades. Although many occupations remained closed to women, others quietly welcomed their skill and determination. Some unmarried women became expert seamstresses. Others embroidered fine garments for wealthy households. Some prepared candles from beeswax. Others copied manuscripts before the printing press transformed Europe. Many helped run inns, managed market stalls, or assisted relatives in family businesses. These occupations rarely brought great wealth, but they brought something nearly as valuable: independence. Picture yourself entering a narrow workshop where sunlight filters through small leaded windows. Dust dances gently in the warm beams of light. Wooden shelves hold carefully folded fabrics, dyed with soft shades of blue, green, brown, and deep red. Needles, scissors, measuring cords, and spools of thread rest neatly upon a sturdy work table. Agnes greets another woman already busy with her stitching. Neither woman wears expensive clothing. Their hands reveal years of careful labor. Tiny scars, rough fingertips, and steady movements tell stories more honestly than any written record. For hours they work quietly together. Their conversation drifts gently from the weather to market prices, then to a neighbor recovering from illness. No one speaks hurriedly. Silence itself feels comfortable. Many unmarried women found companionship not through marriage, but through friendships like these. History often celebrates husbands and wives while overlooking the powerful friendships that quietly shaped everyday life. Two sisters sharing one household. Two lifelong friends supporting one another. An aunt helping raise nieces and nephews. A woman caring for an elderly neighbor with no close family. These relationships rarely appeared in official records, yet they formed an important part of community life. Another unwritten rule slowly revealed itself. Never allow loneliness to become visible. This did not mean unmarried women never felt lonely. Of course they did. Loneliness is part of being human, no matter the century. But society often expected them to carry private sadness with remarkable grace. Openly expressing disappointment over never marrying could invite uncomfortable sympathy. Complaining too often risked being labeled bitter. Speaking too confidently about enjoying single life might appear unusual to those who believed marriage was every woman's greatest purpose. So many women quietly learned a delicate balance. They accepted kindness when it came. They offered kindness whenever they could, and they kept many of their deepest thoughts within trusted circles, if they shared them at all. Imagine sitting beside Agnes during the midday meal. Lunch is simple. Dark bread, a small piece of cheese, fresh onions, perhaps a little ale or watered wine, depending upon local custom. The meal is plain, but nourishing. Nearby, merchants discuss the arrival of wool from neighboring counties. Children laugh as they chase one another through the square. A traveling musician gently plays a small harp, its soft melody drifting through the busy marketplace. Agnes watches quietly. She smiles occasionally. She seems content, yet no historian can know every thought that passed through her mind. History leaves us evidence of actions. Thoughts often disappear forever. This reminds us to approach the past with humility. Not every unmarried woman wished she had married. Not every unmarried woman preferred remaining single. Each life was unique. Each story unfolded differently. As the afternoon passes, another unwritten expectation begins to appear. Become someone others can trust with responsibility. Trust came slowly. It was earned through years of reliability. An unmarried woman might become responsible for keeping financial accounts within a family business. She might supervise younger apprentices learning household skills. She might organize supplies for a convent or charitable house. Sometimes she cared for children whose parents had died unexpectedly. At other times, she became the dependable neighbor everyone called during difficult moments. Birth, illness, harvest, funerals. Life constantly required helping hands. Many unmarried women became those dependable hands. Picture yourself walking through quiet streets as evening approaches. Shadows lengthen across the cobblestones. Shopkeepers close heavy wooden shutters. The smell of roasted onions and herbs drifts from nearby kitchens. Cats slip silently through narrow alleys, searching for their evening meal. Above the rooftops, smoke rises lazily into the cooling sky. The town begins settling into another peaceful night. Agnes returns home carrying fewer pieces of cloth than she brought that morning. She has earned enough to buy flour, lamp oil, and a little salt. Nothing extravagant. Simply enough to continue another week. For many women throughout history, this quiet financial stability represented an important achievement. Without a husband, careful planning became even more necessary. Every purchase mattered. Every harvest mattered. Every unexpected illness could change everything. Saving small amounts whenever possible became another unwritten habit. Coins were wrapped carefully in cloth or hidden inside wooden chests. Extra grain might be stored against future shortages. Clothing was repaired instead of replaced. Nothing useful was wasted. These practices were common in many households, married or unmarried alike. Yet for women living independently, careful management often meant the difference between comfort and hardship. As evening deepens, Candles begin glowing softly behind tiny windows. Families gather for supper. Prayers are spoken quietly before bread is shared. Stories pass gently from grandparents to children. Across the town, countless ordinary lives continue unseen by history. Some women rock sleeping babies. Some prepare for tomorrow's work. Some mend clothing by candlelight. And some, like Agnes, spend the final quiet moments of the day reading a treasured prayer, repairing worn garments, or simply sitting beside the fire, listening to the gentle pop of burning wood. Outside, the streets grow still. Only the distant footsteps of the night watch disturb the silence. The stars appear one by one above the rooftops, just as they have for countless generations. Our journey continues gently onward. Soon, we will discover how unmarried women navigated family expectations, inheritance, aging, and the quiet respect, or quiet misunderstandings, that often accompanied a life lived beyond society's most familiar path. For now, let the warmth of the hearth, the distant bells, and the peaceful rhythm of this medieval evening carry you softly into the next chapter of our journey through history. The night slowly gives way to another peaceful dawn. The stars begin to fade, one by one, as a pale ribbon of light stretches across the eastern horizon. The cool air carries the scent of damp grass and freshly turned soil. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, a cow bellows softly, answered by the gentle clucking of hens already wandering through farmyards. A baker's oven has been glowing since before sunrise, and the comforting fragrance of warm bread drifts quietly through the streets. Imagine standing beside a narrow stone bridge as the town slowly awakens around you. The water beneath reflects the first hints of golden morning light. Wooden wheels roll across the bridge, their slow rhythm blending with the distant ringing of church bells. Today, our gentle walk leads us toward another part of life that quietly shaped the experience of many women who never married. It was not a written law. No official document declared it. Yet almost everyone understood it. The unwritten expectation was this: an unmarried woman would always remain closely connected to her family. Even after reaching adulthood, many people continued to see her first as someone's daughter, sister, aunt, or cousin, rather than as an independent individual. For a married woman, society often expected her identity to shift toward her husband's household. For an unmarried woman, that transition usually never came. Instead, she often remained within the orbit of the family into which she had been born. Picture yourself entering a modest farmhouse, surrounded by fields of barley gently swaying in the morning breeze. Inside, the household is already busy. An elderly father sharpens a farming tool near the doorway. A younger brother prepares to lead 2 horses into the fields. A mother stirs a pot hanging above the fire, and beside the hearth sits Margaret, an unmarried daughter in her late 30s. She has lived in this home for many years. She knows every loose floorboard, every cupboard, every small crack in the stone walls. Without anyone formally assigning the task, Margaret has quietly become one of the people who keeps the household together. She prepares meals. She mends clothing. She keeps careful watch over stored grain. She remembers birthdays, feast days, and family traditions. When neighbors visit, she welcomes them warmly. When someone falls ill, she is often the first to prepare herbal infusions or cool cloths for a fever. None of these responsibilities appear extraordinary, yet together they form the invisible framework of everyday life. History often celebrates battles, kings, and explorers. But homes survived because someone quietly remembered thousands of small details. Many unmarried women became the keepers of those details. As the morning slowly arrives, sunlight spills across the wooden table, where Margaret kneads dough with steady hands. The simple rhythm of her work feels almost musical. Press, fold, turn, again. The dough slowly becomes smooth beneath her palms. Nearby, a kettle begins to sing softly over the fire. These peaceful moments remind us that history is not only found in castles and great cities. It also lives inside kitchens, gardens, workshops, laundry yards, places where ordinary people spent most of their lives. Another unwritten rule gradually becomes visible. Be available when the family needs you. This expectation could bring both comfort and burden. Many unmarried women willingly cared for aging parents. They remained at home long after brothers and sisters had established families of their own. Sometimes this arrangement suited everyone. Parents received loving care. The daughter had security and companionship. The household remained stable. Yet in other cases, the expectation left little room for personal choice. A woman who might have wished to travel, begin a business elsewhere, or even marry later in life, sometimes found herself unable to leave. Responsibility quietly rooted her where she already stood. Picture yourself walking with Margaret into a small herb garden behind the house. Rows of sage, thyme, rosemary, and mint release their gentle fragrance into the cool air. Bundles of lavender dry beneath a covered porch. Bees drift lazily among flowering plants. Margaret gathers herbs carefully. She has learned from her mother which leaves flavor soup, which calm an upset stomach, and which simply make the house smell pleasant during winter. Knowledge like this often passed quietly between generations of women. Few lessons were written down. Instead, they were learned through observation, through repetition, through patient conversation, while working together. An unmarried daughter frequently became the guardian of this practical wisdom. She remembered recipes, medicinal herbs, family stories, traditional songs, seasonal customs. These treasures were rarely considered important enough for official history, yet they shaped daily life for countless generations. As the sun climbs higher, neighbors begin arriving with small requests. One woman asks to borrow a baking pan. Another wonders whether Margaret has spare flax thread. An elderly man seeks advice about preserving apples before autumn. Margaret answers each question with gentle patience. This brings us to another quiet truth. Respect was often earned through reliability rather than status. Without wealth or a prominent husband, many unmarried women built their place in society through consistency. People trusted them because they always kept their word. If they promised to help with a harvest, they arrived. If they agreed to watch children, they stayed attentive. If they borrowed a tool, they returned it in good condition. Year after year, these simple acts quietly built lasting reputations. Imagine how comforting such dependability must have been in a world where life was often uncertain. Harvests sometimes failed. Illness could arrive without warning. Winters could be long. In uncertain times, dependable neighbors became priceless. Many unmarried women quietly became those neighbors. As afternoon sunlight warms the fields, children return from gathering firewood. One little girl sits beside Margaret, carefully watching her spin wool into thread. Her small fingers try to copy each movement. The thread breaks. She laughs softly. Margaret smiles and patiently begins again. There is no hurry. Lessons are rarely learned in a single afternoon. This simple scene reminds us that teaching was another role often carried by unmarried women. Not formal teaching in schools, which remained limited for much of history. Instead, everyday teaching, showing a child how to sew, how to preserve vegetables, how to care for chickens, how to recognize changing weather, how to prepare a fire safely. These quiet lessons traveled from one generation to another without ever appearing in official records. Thousands upon thousands of women became teachers without ever receiving that title. As evening approaches, clouds gather slowly across the western sky. A light rain begins to fall. Tiny drops tap gently against the cottage roof. Inside, candles are lit one by one. The warm glow fills the room with a peaceful calm. Family members gather around the fire after another long day. Someone tells an old story remembered from childhood. Another quietly repairs a wooden basket. Margaret continues stitching a worn sleeve that will soon be ready for another season of use. Nothing in this moment seems remarkable. Yet perhaps that is precisely what makes it beautiful. History is often built from ordinary evenings exactly like this one. Another unwritten expectation quietly appears before our eyes. Do not expect recognition. Many unmarried women gave years, even decades, of devoted service to their families. They cooked, cleaned, nursed, managed households, raised younger siblings after the death of a parent, supported aging relatives, helped with family businesses. Yet their contributions were often treated as simply what was expected. Recognition was quiet. Sometimes it came only through small gestures. A grateful smile, a place near the fire, the trust to manage household keys, an affectionate nickname from nieces and nephews. These small signs of appreciation mattered deeply. Although they rarely appeared in written records, they formed part of the emotional fabric of everyday life. The rain outside grows softer. Its gentle rhythm blends with the crackling fire. Somewhere beyond the fields, an owl calls into the evening darkness. The household slowly prepares for sleep. Tomorrow will bring another day of familiar work, another day of small responsibilities, another day in which Margaret's quiet presence helps everything run smoothly. As we leave this peaceful farmhouse behind, we begin to understand that the unwritten rules surrounding unmarried women were rarely simple. Some offered security, some limited opportunity. Many reflected the values of their communities rather than the wishes of the women themselves. History, like life, is rarely divided into simple stories of happiness or hardship. Instead, it is woven from countless shades in between. Our journey has only begun to uncover these hidden lives. Ahead lie the bustling market towns, the peaceful convents, the homes of prosperous merchants, and the quiet cottages of elderly women whose wisdom would become one of their community's greatest treasures. For now, let the gentle rain continue its soft song upon the roof. The fire burns steadily through the evening, and the quiet footsteps of history guide us peacefully onward. Another morning arrives with quiet certainty. The rain that sang upon the cottage roof through the night has passed, leaving the world washed clean. Tiny drops cling to the edges of leaves, catching the first rays of sunlight like little pieces of glass. A cool breeze moves gently through the trees, carrying the scent of wet earth and fresh hay. Somewhere beyond the fields, a shepherd softly calls to his flock, while the steady cooing of doves echoes from the eaves of old stone buildings. Imagine walking along a narrow country lane where puddles still reflect the pale blue sky. Your footsteps are slow, unhurried, and the peaceful silence allows every small sound to be heard. A cart rolls by with wooden wheels that creak gently against the damp road. Its driver tips his hat with a quiet smile before continuing toward the market. As our journey continues, we begin to notice another unwritten rule that quietly shaped the lives of many unmarried women. Know your place within the community. This did not mean accepting unfairness without thought, nor did it suggest that every woman agreed with the customs around her. Rather, it reflected the reality that medieval and early modern communities depended heavily upon cooperation. Reputation and harmony often mattered more than personal ambition. An unmarried woman who understood the expectations of her neighbors often found life a little easier. She greeted people warmly. She offered help during difficult seasons. She attended church or local religious gatherings according to the customs of her community. She participated in harvest celebrations, feast days, and village traditions. These simple acts reminded others that although she did not fit the usual pattern of married life, she still belonged. Picture yourself entering the marketplace on a cool autumn morning. The square is already alive with quiet activity. Farmers arrange baskets filled with onions, cabbages, apples, and carrots harvested only yesterday. A cooper displays sturdy wooden barrels. A potter carefully sets out glazed bowls that shine softly beneath the morning light. Near the center of the square stands Eleanor, a woman who is never married. She is neither wealthy nor poor. She owns a modest stall where she sells finely woven linen cloth. Customers greet her by name. Many have known her for years. One elderly woman asks about Eleanor's aging mother. A young apprentice thanks her for repairing a torn cloak the previous winter. Another customer lingers only to exchange a few pleasant words before continuing on his way. These conversations may seem ordinary, yet they reveal something important. Trust grows slowly. For women who remained unmarried, long-standing trust could become one of their greatest treasures. It could not be purchased. It could only be earned. As the morning slowly arrives in full, the marketplace becomes busier. Children weave between adults carrying baskets nearly as large as themselves. A monk passes quietly through the crowd. Traveling merchants unload bundles of wool and carefully wrapped pottery. The smell of roasted chestnuts begins to drift from a nearby brazier. Life moves with a comfortable rhythm. Within this rhythm, Eleanor knows almost everyone. She remembers whose daughter recently married. She remembers which farmer lost his horse during the previous winter. She remembers which widow now lives alone after many years of marriage. Memory itself becomes another quiet form of kindness. Many unmarried women served as living keepers of community history, not history written with ink. History carried within conversation. Who was related to whom? Which family once owned a particular field? Which neighbor had shown generosity during a famine many years earlier? These memories strengthened the bonds between people. Imagine sitting beside Eleanor during the quiet moments between customers. She carefully folds a length of linen while watching the marketplace continue around her. A young girl approaches shyly. She hopes to learn sewing well enough to earn her own living one day. Eleanor smiles gently and invites her to sit. Patiently, she demonstrates how to guide a needle through tightly woven fabric without pulling the thread too firmly. The lesson is simple. The needle enters. The thread follows. The stitch lies flat, again and again. The girl listens carefully. Her fingers move awkwardly at first. Soon they become steadier. Perhaps neither of them realizes that this small lesson will remain in the girl's memory for the rest of her life. History is filled with such quiet moments. Skills passed from one pair of hands to another. No audience. No applause. Only patient teaching. Another unwritten expectation gradually reveals itself. Share knowledge freely. Practical knowledge was one of the greatest gifts a woman could offer. How to preserve fruit for winter. How to remove stubborn stains from wool. How to prepare herbs that eased a sore throat. How to repair worn shoes with scraps of leather. How to stretch a family's food supplies until the next harvest. Many unmarried women became respected because they willingly shared what they knew. Knowledge was not always treated as something to guard. Often, it was something to pat forward. Picture yourself walking with Eleanor after the market begins to quiet. She carries only a small basket. Most of her cloth has been sold. The afternoon sunlight casts long shadows across the road leading home. She pauses beside a small stream where clear water slips gently over smooth stones. The sound is soothing. Dragonflies hover above the water. Nearby, willow branches sway lazily in the breeze. She sits for a few peaceful moments before continuing. Perhaps this is one of the few times during her busy week when no one asks anything of her. No household chore, no customer, no neighbor needing assistance. Only quiet. Even in centuries past, people needed moments of rest. Although history often describes endless labor, ordinary people also paused whenever circumstances allowed. They watched sunsets. They listened to birds. They enjoyed cool evenings after long summer days. These peaceful moments belonged to unmarried women just as surely as anyone else. As evening approaches, Eleanor reaches the small house she shares with her widowed sister. Their arrangement is not unusual. Throughout history, many unmarried women lived with relatives. 2 sisters, an unmarried aunt and her nephew, a daughter caring for her mother, several generations beneath one roof. These households remind us that family life took many different forms. Marriage was common, yet it was never the only way people created homes filled with affection and responsibility. Inside the house, supper is already simmering above the fire. The aroma of vegetable stew fills the room. Fresh herbs add a gentle fragrance. Dark bread rests beneath a clean linen cloth. The meal is simple but satisfying. As they eat, the sisters speak quietly about tomorrow's work. One mentions repairing blankets before winter. The other remembers that candles should soon be made while the evenings remain cool. Neither conversation seems extraordinary, yet both reveal careful planning. Another unwritten rule quietly guided many unmarried women. Prepare for tomorrow. Without the financial protection that marriage sometimes provided, planning ahead became especially important. Firewood was gathered before snow arrived. Herbs were dried before autumn rains. Clothing was repaired before cold weather settled across the countryside. Food was preserved whenever gardens produced more than a family could immediately eat. Preparation offered peace of mind, not certainty. Only peace. Outside, darkness gradually settles across the fields. The last travelers hurry home before the gates close for the night. A church bell rings slowly in the distance. Its familiar sound reminds everyone that another day has gently come to an end. Eleanor places another piece of wood upon the fire. The flames brighten for a moment before settling once again into a soft, steady glow. She reaches for a basket of mending that waits patiently beside her chair. A stocking needs careful repair. A sleeve requires fresh stitching. Small tasks remain. They always do. Yet there is no sense of rushing. Tomorrow will arrive in its own time. As we watch the quiet rhythm of this household, we begin to understand that the unwritten rules surrounding unmarried women were woven into almost every corner of daily life. Be dependable. Be prepared. Share what you know. Support your community. Protect your reputation. These expectations could sometimes feel heavy. Yet they also allowed many women to build lives marked by purpose, friendship, and quiet respect. Their names may not appear in royal records or famous chronicles, but they helped hold together the ordinary world in which most people lived. And perhaps that ordinary world deserves just as much of our attention. The fire burns lower. The conversation fades. Outside, the moon rises above the rooftops, casting silver light across sleeping gardens and empty lanes. The town grows still once more. Soon, our gentle journey will lead us into another chapter, where we will explore how age changed the lives of unmarried women, and how wisdom, experience, and memory gradually became some of their greatest possessions. Until then, let the peaceful sounds of the quiet evening settle softly around you as history continues its gentle walk into the night. The quiet hours of the night slowly melt into another gentle morning. Long before the sun rises above the rooftops, a faint silver light begins to spread across the countryside. The fields are still wrapped in a thin blanket of mist, and the air feels cool enough that each breath seems wonderfully fresh. Somewhere nearby, a stream continues its endless journey over smooth stones, sounding almost like a whispered conversation that has lasted for centuries. Imagine standing at the edge of a small orchard. The branches of apple trees bend gently beneath the weight of ripening fruit. A few leaves drift softly to the ground, turning slowly before coming to rest upon the damp grass. In the distance, smoke rises lazily from cottage chimneys as the first household fires of the morning are carefully lit. You find yourself following a narrow footpath toward another quiet home. The woman who lives here is called Joan. She is never married. Now she is nearly 60 years old. In many parts of medieval and early modern Europe, reaching such an age was itself an achievement. Life could be uncertain. Illnesses that are easily treated today often became dangerous. Hard physical labor shaped every season. Winters tested both strength and preparation. Yet Joan has reached later life with steady hands, clear eyes, and a mind filled with memories. Her little cottage sits beside a patch of vegetables bordered by woven fences. Beans climb slender wooden poles. Cabbages grow in neat rows. A few chickens wander freely, scratching patiently through the soil. Nothing about the place appears grand. Everything about it appears cared for. As the morning slowly arrives, Joan opens her front door and pauses for a moment beneath the pale sky. She closes her eyes briefly, feeling the cool breeze against her face. It is a simple habit, perhaps one she has followed for many years. History rarely records such moments. Yet ordinary people have always appreciated the quiet beauty of a new day. She gathers a small basket and begins checking her garden. A wilted leaf is removed. A ripe onion is carefully lifted from the earth. A handful of herbs is cut for the evening meal. Every movement reflects long experience. She wastes nothing. One of the quiet unwritten rules that often shaped the lives of older unmarried women was this: become a source of wisdom. No ceremony marked this change. No official title was given. Instead, it happened gradually. Year after year, people simply began asking for advice. A young mother might stop at Joan's gate to ask whether the coming frost would damage her vegetables. A neighbor might wonder how to remove stubborn mold from stored grain. A child might arrive carrying torn clothing, hoping Joan could repair it. Even the village priest might occasionally ask whether she remembered the details of an event that happened decades earlier. Memory itself became valuable. Imagine sitting beside Joan on a weathered wooden bench outside her cottage. The morning sun has now climbed above the trees, warming the garden with gentle light. She shells peas into a wooden bowl, while a small girl sits quietly beside her. The child asks what the village was like when Joan herself was young. Joan smiles. She tells stories of winters that seemed endless, of harvest festivals filled with music, of neighbors long gone whose kindness was still remembered. Her voice is calm. There is no rush. The little girl listens with complete attention. In this peaceful exchange, history passes from one generation to another, not through books, not through official records, but through conversation. Many unmarried women became quiet keepers of local memory. They remembered births, weddings, storms, difficult harvests, and joyful celebrations that younger people had never witnessed. These memories helped communities understand themselves. Another unwritten expectation slowly became visible. Remain generous with your time. Older unmarried women were often expected to help whenever they could. Sometimes they looked after children while parents worked in the fields. Sometimes they visited neighbors recovering from illness. Sometimes they prepared meals for families facing hardship after a death. Acts of kindness were woven naturally into daily life. Most were never repaid with money. Instead, kindness itself became part of the community's invisible exchange. One neighbor shared firewood. Another repaired a leaking roof. Someone else offered fresh milk after a cow had calved. Support flowed quietly between households. Picture yourself walking with Joan through the village during the late morning. Everyone seems to know her. A baker waves cheerfully from his doorway. An elderly shepherd pauses to exchange a few friendly words. Children greet her without fear. Some even run to her, eager to tell stories about their morning adventures. Respect like this had taken decades to earn. It came not from wealth, nor from noble birth. It came from consistency, from patience, from living honestly through many changing seasons. Yet history also reminds us that growing older without marrying could sometimes bring uncertainty. If an unmarried woman had no close relatives, questions naturally arose. Who would care for her if illness came? Who would help repair her cottage? Who would harvest her garden if she became too weak? These were practical concerns, rather than simply emotional ones. Life depended heavily upon physical work. Communities often stepped forward to help those they trusted. Families helped whenever they could. Religious institutions sometimes offered assistance. Neighbors occasionally shared responsibilities. But none of these arrangements were guaranteed. Security often rested upon relationships carefully built over a lifetime. As afternoon sunlight spreads across the fields, Joan pauses beside the village well. Several younger women have gathered there, filling wooden buckets with fresh water. Their conversation moves gently from the weather to preparations for the coming winter. One asks Joan whether she remembers the great snowfall from many years ago. She laughs softly. "Oh, I remember it well," she says. "The snow covered the fences so completely that children walked across them without knowing where the fields ended." The younger women smile. Perhaps they have heard this story before. Perhaps not. Either way, they enjoy hearing it again. Stories like these connected generations. They reminded young people that difficult seasons always passed eventually. Imagine how comforting that knowledge must have been. The afternoon grows quieter. The marketplace begins to empty. The blacksmith's hammer falls less often. Even the birds seem content to rest beneath the shade of old trees. Joan returns home, carrying only a basket of vegetables and a bundle of herbs. It is enough. Her life has become wonderfully simple. Not easy, simply uncomplicated. She prepares a small meal. A pot of vegetable broth simmers gently above the fire. Fresh herbs release their pleasant fragrance into the warm room. A slice of coarse bread rests beside a small piece of cheese. Outside, the wind rustles softly through the orchard. She eats slowly. There is no need to hurry. After the meal, she settles beside the window with a basket of mending. The afternoon light is perfect for careful stitching. Each stitch is small, neat, almost identical to the one before it. The rhythm itself feels peaceful. Perhaps this quiet patience is another lesson history offers us. Many of the women we meet on this journey measured success differently from the modern world. They did not seek fame. Most never traveled far from home. Their victories were often invisible. A well-kept household, a neighbor comforted during grief, a child taught an important skill, a harvest safely stored before winter, a family tradition remembered. These achievements rarely appeared in written chronicles, yet they gave strength to entire communities. As evening approaches, the western sky slowly turns shades of gold, and soft rose. The first stars wait patiently beyond the fading daylight. Joan steps outside once more. She waters the last few plants in her garden. She pauses to watch a flock of birds cross the sky together. For a few moments, nothing else asks for her attention. Only the gentle sounds of nature remain. The evening breeze carries the faint scent of wood smoke from nearby cottages. Somewhere, someone begins singing a quiet hymn while finishing the day's work. The melody drifts gently across the fields before fading into the growing darkness. Our peaceful journey continues to reveal that the unwritten rules surrounding unmarried women changed as the years passed. Youth often brought questions. Middle age brought responsibility. Old age often brought wisdom. Not because every older woman possessed every answer, but because experience itself became a valuable gift. Tomorrow, our gentle walk will lead us further into the lives of women who found unexpected freedom through craft, trade, learning, and quiet independence, paths that history sometimes overlooked, but never entirely forgot. For now, let the stars slowly brighten above the sleeping village, the fire burn low within Joan's cottage, and the calm rhythm of another ordinary day carry us softly into the next chapter of our journey through history. Morning arrives with the quiet confidence of countless mornings before it. A gentle veil of mist rests upon the meadows, softening every distant hedge and stone wall. The first rays of sunlight reach across the landscape, touching rooftops still damp from the night's dew. Somewhere nearby, a horse snorts gently in its stable, while sparrows begin their cheerful conversations beneath the eaves of timber-framed houses. Imagine breathing in the cool morning air. It carries the familiar scent of fresh grass, damp wood, and smoke rising from the first kitchen fires of the day. The village is slowly waking, not with haste, but with the comforting rhythm of ordinary life. Our path today leads beyond the cottages and fields, toward a growing market town, where opportunity sometimes appeared in unexpected places. Here we meet another woman whose quiet life tells a story that history often leaves between its lines. Her name is Alice. She is never married. Unlike many women of her generation, she lives alone in a modest house not far from the marketplace. It is a small building with whitewashed walls, a thatched roof carefully repaired each spring, and a tiny garden where herbs grow beside flowering plants that brighten the narrow lane. Nothing about her home announces wealth, yet it reflects careful attention. The shutters are freshly painted. The path is swept clean. Bundles of lavender hang drying beneath the porch, filling the air with their gentle fragrance whenever the breeze passes through. As the morning slowly arrives, Alice unlocks the wooden door of her workshop. Inside, sunlight filters through two small windows, falling across a sturdy workbench, polished smooth by decades of use. Shelves line the walls. They hold folded cloth, baskets of thread, wooden measuring sticks, iron scissors, beeswax candles, and carefully wrapped parcels awaiting collection. Alice earns her living as a skilled seamstress. Throughout much of European history, sewing was more than a household chore. It was an essential craft. Before machines transformed clothing production, nearly every garment required hours of careful work. Every shirt, every cloak, every apron, every blanket. Someone's patient hands had stitched them together. For women with skill and determination, sewing could provide a modest but dependable income. Not every town offered such opportunities. Not every woman enjoyed equal freedom. Customs differed from one region to another, and local laws could shape what work women were permitted to do. Yet across many places, unmarried women quietly built respectable livelihoods through crafts that communities valued. Picture yourself watching Alice begin her day. She lights a candle, even though the morning sun is growing brighter. Old habits remain comforting. She smooths a length of linen across the table. Her measuring cord slips gently through her fingers. The scissors open and close with a soft metallic sound. Snip. Pause. Measure. Fold. Again. Each movement is calm and practiced. Years of repetition have turned difficult work into graceful routine. Soon, her first customer arrives. It is a young husband, carrying his wife's winter cloak. One sleeve has begun to separate, where years of use have weakened the stitching. He removes his cap politely. Alice examines the garment carefully. She does not promise impossible things. Instead, she smiles gently. It will be ready before the week's end. The man nods with quiet gratitude. Trust is built through promises that are kept. This simple exchange reminds us of another unwritten rule that often surrounded unmarried women. Let your work speak before your words. Boasting was rarely admired, especially for women. A good reputation often rested upon quiet competence. Customers returned because garments lasted. Neighbors recommended a craftswoman because she charged fairly. Families sought her help because they knew she would finish what she began. Skill became its own introduction. Imagine the steady rhythm of the workshop as the day unfolds. The door opens, the door closes. A child arrives carrying trousers that have become too short after a season of growing. An elderly widow requests a warm shawl before winter. A merchant asks for sturdy cloth bags to carry dried herbs. Every customer brings a different story. Every garment carries signs of the life it has already lived. A patch upon one elbow suggests years of hard work. Faded colors speak of countless sunny days. Carefully repaired seams reveal families who valued thrift over fashion. History often survives in unexpected places, not only in castles or libraries. Sometimes it survives in worn clothing, carefully mended again and again. As midday approaches, Alice pauses for her meal. It is simple. A slice of coarse bread, a little cheese, perhaps an apple from the autumn harvest, a cup of watered ale or fresh well water. She eats beside the open doorway, allowing the fresh air to drift into the workshop. Across the street, children chase a hoop made from an old barrel ring. Their laughter rises above the sounds of merchants arranging goods in the marketplace. A pair of pigeons settle upon a nearby roof, cooing softly in the warmth of the sun. These ordinary moments remind us that happiness was rarely found in grand events alone. It often appeared quietly, in peaceful afternoons, in satisfying work, in familiar neighbors, in knowing that another day's labor had purpose. Another unwritten expectation slowly reveals itself. Guard your independence wisely. For an unmarried woman who supported herself, independence brought both freedom and responsibility. There was no husband's income to rely upon during difficult months. Poor harvests could reduce customers. Illness might prevent work altogether. A damaged roof could consume savings gathered over many years. Careful planning, therefore, became essential. Alice keeps a small wooden chest hidden beneath her bed. Inside rests a cloth pouch containing coins earned one careful stitch at a time. Some will purchase firewood before winter. Some will replace worn tools. Some must remain untouched unless genuine hardship arrives. Saving was not simply a habit. It was a quiet form of security. Picture yourself accompanying Alice to the weekly market. The square is alive with gentle conversation. Farmers display baskets overflowing with turnips, onions, beans, and apples. Fishmongers arrange their morning catch upon damp cloths. Potters proudly display sturdy bowls whose glazed surfaces catch the afternoon light. The smell of fresh bread mingles with beeswax, herbs, leather, and wood smoke. It is a rich tapestry of everyday life. Alice moves through the market with calm confidence. Many people greet her by name. Some ask about completed orders. Others simply exchange pleasant words before continuing with their own errands. She belongs here. Not because she married into an established household, but because years of honest work have woven her naturally into the life of the town. Respect, once again, has grown quietly. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. As the afternoon begins to fade, a young girl timidly enters Alice's workshop. She is perhaps 12 years old. Her father repairs carts. Her mother washes clothing for wealthier households. The girl wishes to learn sewing, not merely as a household skill. She dreams of one day earning her own living. Alice studies her for a moment before handing her a needle and a scrap of cloth. "There is no need to hurry," she says softly. "The cloth teaches patience before it teaches skill." The girl's first stitches wander unevenly across the fabric. Some are too loose, others pull too tightly. She blushes with embarrassment. Alice simply smiles. She remembers her own first attempts many years ago. Patient instruction follows, not criticism, only encouragement. Across history, knowledge often traveled this way. One careful lesson at a time, without classrooms, without printed manuals, without certificates. Only experienced hands gently guiding younger ones. As evening approaches, the workshop grows quieter. The final customer collects a repaired cloak. The candle burns lower. Outside, the market slowly empties. Merchants cover their goods against the cool night air. The church bell rings once, then again, its familiar sound drifting gently across the rooftops. Alice sweeps the workshop floor. Tiny threads gather into a neat pile. Scissors return to their shelf. Folded fabrics are covered against dust. Tomorrow's work already waits patiently upon the table. She closes the shutters and steps outside. The sky has turned soft shades of amber and violet. A cool breeze carries the scent of distant fireplaces, beginning their evening warmth. For a few peaceful moments, she simply stands and watches swallows circle gracefully overhead before disappearing toward their nests. There is no audience, no applause, only the quiet satisfaction of another honest day's work. As darkness gently settles across the town, we begin to see that many unmarried women created lives defined not by what they lacked, but by what they quietly built. They built trust. They built skill. They built friendships. They built homes filled with order and care. And through steady labor, they built places for themselves within communities that sometimes struggled to understand lives lived outside familiar expectations. The moon slowly rises above the sleeping town, silver light touching rooftops, gardens, and winding streets alike. Our journey is far from over. Soon we shall step inside the peaceful walls of convents and charitable houses, where some unmarried women found not only purpose and education, but a different kind of family, one shaped by shared devotion, learning, and daily service. Until then, let the evening grow still, the last candle fade into darkness, and the quiet footsteps of the past lead us gently onward. The moon slowly completes its quiet journey across the sky, and before long, the first pale light of dawn begins to soften the darkness once again. The stars fade gently, one after another, until only the brightest remain. A cool breeze slips through the branches of ancient trees, carrying the delicate scent of wildflowers, damp stone, and the faint smoke of fires that never fully went out during the night. Imagine walking along a narrow path that winds away from the busy marketplace. The sounds of merchants and craftsmen gradually disappear behind you, replaced by birdsong and the peaceful rustling of leaves. Ahead, resting upon a gentle hill, stands a stone building surrounded by gardens, orchards, and carefully tended fields. It is a convent. For many people today, the word may bring to mind silence and prayer alone. Yet the reality was often far richer. Across medieval and early modern Europe, convents served many different purposes. They were places of worship, certainly, but they could also become centers of learning, music, healthcare, manuscript copying, education, and charitable work. Not every unmarried woman entered a convent, and not every convent was the same. Customs differed from one region to another, and the daily lives of nuns varied according to their religious order and local circumstances. Still, for some women who never married, the convent offered something unusual, a recognized place within society. You find yourself approaching the heavy wooden gate as morning bells begin to ring. Their sound is calm and measured, not hurried, not demanding, simply inviting another day to begin. A sister opens the gate with a warm smile. Her clothing is plain, her movements are unhurried. She welcomes a farmer delivering vegetables from a nearby village before quietly returning to her morning duties. Inside the walls, the gardens are already alive. Rows of medicinal herbs grow in neat patterns: rosemary, sage, mint, chamomile, lavender. The morning dew still clings to every leaf, sparkling softly beneath the rising sun. A few bees have already begun their day's work, drifting lazily from flower to flower. Imagine breathing in the fragrance of the herb garden. The air feels wonderfully fresh. Birds sing from fruit trees, whose branches gently sway in the breeze. The peaceful rhythm of this place seems untouched by the hurried concerns beyond its walls. Here we meet Sister Catherine. Like countless women throughout history, she did not marry. Her reasons belong mostly to the past. Perhaps she felt a deep religious calling. Perhaps her family encouraged this path. Perhaps economic circumstances influenced the decision. History rarely tells us every reason behind an individual's choice. What we do know is that once she entered the convent, her life followed a different rhythm from many of her neighbors. As the morning slowly arrives, Sister Catherine joins the other women in quiet prayer. The voices rise gently together, filling the stone chapel with simple melodies that echo softly beneath the high ceiling. Even those who do not share the same faith can appreciate the peaceful atmosphere. The songs are not performed for applause. They are simply part of daily life. After prayer comes work. One of the quiet truths about convent life is that idleness was rarely encouraged. Every sister had responsibilities. Some prepared meals. Some cared for gardens. Some copied books by hand. Others tended the sick or taught children. Work itself became a form of service. Picture yourself entering a small room filled with wooden desks positioned near tall windows. Morning light pours across sheets of carefully prepared parchment. Small bottles of ink rest beside neatly trimmed quills. Sister Catherine sits quietly at one desk. With slow, steady movements, she copies a page from an older manuscript. Every letter is formed with remarkable care. There is no haste. One mistake might require beginning the page again. The scratching of quills upon parchment becomes the only sound in the room. Long before printing presses became common, countless books survived because patient hands copied them line by line. Some of those hands belonged to women. Their names were often forgotten. Yet their careful work preserved knowledge for generations yet to come. Another unwritten rule gently reveals itself. Whatever your task, do it with patience. This principle extended beyond convent walls. Many unmarried women throughout history earned respect not through dramatic achievements, but through careful attention to ordinary responsibilities. A loaf of bread baked well, a garment stitched neatly, a child taught kindly, a patient comforted gently. Small acts, repeated faithfully over many years, quietly shaped entire communities. As the sun climbs higher, the convent becomes busier. A traveler arrives seeking a drink of water. An elderly widow asks for simple medicine prepared from herbs. 2 local children come for lessons in reading and prayer. The sisters welcome each visitor with calm hospitality. Many convents played important roles in their surrounding communities. They offered charity where they could. They cared for those in need when resources allowed. Their ability to help varied greatly depending upon wealth, location, and historical period. But the ideal of service remained central to many religious communities. Imagine following Sister Catherine into the infirmary. The room is simple. Sunlight enters through narrow windows. Bundles of dried herbs hang neatly from wooden beams. Clay jars line shelves against one wall, each carefully labeled according to local custom. The scent of lavender and rosemary fills the air. A young mother sits quietly beside her child, who has been suffering from a fever. Sister Catherine gently places a cool cloth upon the child's forehead. She offers comforting words to the anxious mother. She cannot promise healing. No one could. Medicine in the medieval world had many limitations, yet kindness itself often eased fear. Sometimes that was a gift beyond measure. Outside, the afternoon breeze stirs the leaves of ancient trees. The convent bell rings once again, reminding everyone that another part of the day has arrived. Meals are simple, perhaps vegetable soup, dark bread, a little cheese, fresh apples when the season allows. Nothing extravagant, enough to sustain steady work. During the meal, conversation remains gentle. Some communities observed periods of silence. Others allowed quiet discussion according to their customs. Every convent followed its own traditions. History is rarely one single story. It is a tapestry woven from many different lives. Another unwritten expectation begins to emerge. Seek peace rather than praise. Within convent life, personal recognition mattered little. The work belonged to the community. The gardens flourished because many hands cared for them. The meals were prepared together. The prayers were shared. Success belonged to everyone. Failure, too, was carried together. This spirit of shared responsibility offered a different way of living from the households we have previously visited. Picture yourself walking through the orchard during the late afternoon. Pear trees cast long shadows across the grass. A gentle wind causes ripe fruit to fall softly onto the earth. Several sisters gather the fruit into woven baskets, laughing quietly as they work. Their joy is gentle. Not loud, not forced. Simply the quiet happiness that sometimes grows from familiar companionship. History often reminds us that unmarried women were not always alone. Many built deep friendships. Whether within convents, family homes, workshops, or villages, companionship took many forms. Marriage was one path through life. It was not the only path. As evening approaches, golden light washes across the old stone walls. The day's work begins to slow. The herb garden glows softly beneath the setting sun. The birds gradually quiet their songs as they settle into the branches for the night. Sister Catherine pauses beside the garden gate. She looks across the fields where farmers are finishing their final tasks before darkness falls. The world beyond the convent walls continues its familiar rhythm. Children return home. Shepherds gather their flocks. Kitchen fires are lit. Church bells echo faintly across the countryside. Within the convent, candles begin to replace the fading daylight. Their warm glow reflects gently against stone walls that have witnessed generations of women living lives devoted to faith, learning, care, and quiet service. Many of those women never married, yet their lives were far from empty. They taught, they healed, they preserved knowledge, they offered comfort, they cultivated gardens. They welcomed strangers. They prayed for neighbors they might never fully know. Their contributions flowed quietly through history, often unnoticed by those who later wrote its grandest stories. As darkness settles peacefully across the hillside, we leave the convent behind with grateful hearts. Ahead, our journey will take us into the homes of prosperous merchants and growing towns, where unmarried women sometimes inherited businesses, managed property, and quietly challenged expectations through careful leadership and practical wisdom. For now, let the gentle ringing of the evening bell fade into the cool night air. The candles burn softly behind ancient windows, and the calm footsteps of history lead us onward into another peaceful chapter. The gentle ringing of the convent bell slowly fades into the distance as another peaceful night passes across the countryside. Above the sleeping fields, the stars quietly give way to the soft colors of dawn. The eastern sky blushes with pale shades of gold and rose, while a light mist settles over rivers that have flowed through these lands for countless generations. Imagine standing at the crest of a gentle hill. Before you stretches a prosperous market town surrounded by orchards, grain fields, and winding roads that carry merchants from distant places. Thin streams of smoke rise from dozens of chimneys, curling lazily into the cool morning air. Somewhere below, a mill wheel turns steadily in the river, its slow rhythm blending with the songs of birds greeting the new day. Our quiet journey now leads us into a different world. Not the humble cottages of farmers, not the peaceful walls of a convent, but the homes of merchants whose lives were shaped by trade, careful bookkeeping, and the steady movement of goods between towns and kingdoms. Here we meet another woman whose story gently reminds us that history was never quite as simple as it first appears. Her name is Eleanor. She is never married. She lives in a comfortable stone house that stands beside her late father's workshop. The building is larger than most nearby homes, yet it remains modest by the standards of wealthy nobles. Wooden shutters protect the windows, flowering herbs brighten the doorway, and a polished brass lantern hangs beside the entrance. As the morning slowly arrives, Eleanor unlocks the heavy front door. Inside, the house already smells of beeswax, polished wood, and freshly baked bread cooling upon the kitchen table. A young apprentice is carefully sweeping the workshop floor. Another checks bundles of cloth that arrived from a nearby village only yesterday. The day has begun. Many people imagine that businesses in medieval and early modern Europe were managed almost entirely by men. Often that was true. Yet history quietly reveals many exceptions. Widows frequently continued their husbands' businesses. Daughters sometimes inherited workshops when no sons remained. In some towns, unmarried women successfully managed family enterprises, especially if they had spent years learning the trade from parents or relatives. The opportunities available depended greatly upon local customs, guild regulations, and regional laws. No single rule applied everywhere. History always asks us to notice its many variations. Picture yourself stepping inside Eleanor's workshop. Shelves stretch from floor to ceiling. They hold carefully folded bolts of linen, wool, and fine cloth waiting to be measured and sold. Bundles are marked with small wooden tags indicating their origin. One came from nearby villages. Another traveled many days by cart. A finer piece may even have crossed the sea before reaching this quiet town. The workshop feels busy without becoming noisy. Voices remain calm. Customers speak politely. Business here depends upon trust more than speed. Eleanor greets each visitor with quiet confidence. She listens before speaking. She measures cloth carefully, making certain every customer receives exactly what has been promised. Her reputation rests upon fairness. This brings us to another unwritten rule that quietly shaped the lives of many unmarried women who managed property or trade. Be beyond suspicion. A married woman's authority was often understood through her household. An unmarried businesswoman, however, sometimes found herself watched more closely. Were her accounts honest? Were her prices fair? Did she keep her promises? People noticed these things carefully. Not always because they doubted her. Sometimes simply because she stood outside the familiar expectations of society. So women like Eleanor often learned that precision mattered. Every transaction was recorded. Every agreement remembered. Every promise fulfilled. Imagine watching Eleanor open a heavy ledger, resting upon a sturdy oak table. The pages are thick. The ink has faded slightly upon older entries. She carefully records each purchase, not because anyone commands her to do so, because careful records protect everyone. Good bookkeeping has always been a quiet companion to honest trade. Long before modern accounting, merchants understood the value of remembering what had been bought, sold, borrowed, and repaid. The scratching of her quill across the page becomes almost soothing. Outside the window, horses pass slowly along the street. A bell announces the opening of the marketplace. Children hurry past carrying baskets for their mothers. Life unfolds at its familiar pace. As the morning grows warmer, an elderly farmer arrives carrying a length of worn cloth. He removes his cap respectfully. "This belonged to my wife," he says softly. "It has become too thin to mend." Eleanor examines the fabric carefully. Rather than encouraging him to buy the most expensive replacement, she quietly recommends a sturdier cloth that will last many winters. The farmer smiles with gratitude. He knows she could have charged more. Instead, she chose honesty. Trust grows stronger once again. Another unwritten expectation slowly reveals itself. Let fairness become your greatest advertisement. In an age before printed advertisements filled every street, reputation traveled through conversation. One satisfied customer spoke to neighbors. Neighbors spoke to relatives. Travelers carried stories from one town to another. A business built upon honesty often grew quietly through simple recommendation. Picture yourself leaving the workshop for a short walk through the town. The streets are becoming lively now. A cooper shapes wooden barrels with steady blows of his hammer. Nearby, a baker removes another tray of bread from a glowing oven. The comforting aroma fills the entire street. Children laugh as they chase one another around the public well. A pair of geese wander confidently through the marketplace, entirely unconcerned by the busy world around them. These peaceful scenes remind us that commerce was never only about goods. Markets were places where news traveled. Friendships formed. Marriages were discussed. Harvests compared. Journeys planned. An unmarried woman who regularly worked in such places became woven into the social fabric of her town. She was known not only for what she sold, but for how she treated others. As afternoon sunlight streams through the workshop windows, Eleanor pauses to share tea brewed from herbs grown in her own garden with two neighboring craftswomen. Their conversation moves gently between practical matters. A shipment delayed by muddy roads. A family preparing for a wedding. An elderly neighbor recovering after illness. No one speaks loudly. There is comfort in familiar company. History often overlooks these friendships. Yet they matter deeply. Many unmarried women built networks of mutual support long before anyone would have used such modern words. They exchanged advice, shared tools, watched one another's homes during journeys, helped during sickness, celebrated small joys together. These quiet bonds strengthened communities in ways that official records seldom captured. Imagine the late afternoon as sunlight begins turning warmer and softer. Golden rays fall across the workshop floor. Dust drifts lazily through the light. The day's final customer thanks Eleanor for carefully wrapping a bundle of cloth before beginning the journey home. She closes the ledger, returns the measuring cord to its place, extinguishes the candle that has burned quietly throughout the day. Before leaving, she pauses for a moment beside the window. Outside, she watches townspeople making their way home. A father carries his sleeping child upon his shoulder. Two elderly neighbors walk slowly together, sharing quiet conversation. Young apprentices laugh as they finish another day's labor. Every life follows its own path. Some paths are expected, others are less familiar. Yet each deserves to be understood with kindness rather than assumption. As evening slowly settles over the town, Eleanor locks the workshop door and walks into the small garden behind her home. Lavender sways gently in the evening breeze. The scent is calming after a busy day. She gathers a few sprigs to dry for the coming winter. The sky above gradually deepens from soft blue to shades of amber and violet. One by one, the first stars begin to appear. Standing quietly beneath the evening sky, Eleanor reflects upon another ordinary day. No great celebration has marked it. No famous visitor has arrived. No dramatic event has changed her life. And yet, the day has been meaningful. Honest work completed. Customers treated fairly. Friendships strengthened. A home cared for. Sometimes history moves not through grand moments, but through thousands of peaceful days, exactly like this one. As darkness gently embraces the sleeping town, our journey continues onward. Soon we shall explore how aging, inheritance, and changing generations reshaped the lives of unmarried women, and how many became beloved aunts, trusted guardians, and wise neighbors whose quiet influence reached far beyond the walls of their own homes. Until then, let the last glow of sunset fade softly beyond the rooftops. Let the evening breeze whisper through the herb gardens, and let the peaceful footsteps of history guide us gently into the next chapter. Night settles gently over the town, wrapping the rooftops in soft darkness, while the last lanterns flicker behind shuttered windows. The marketplace that bustled with voices only hours earlier now rests in quiet stillness. A cool breeze moves through the narrow streets, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and damp stone. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, before silence returns. Above it all, the stars continue their patient journey. Imagine standing beneath that wide night sky. The same stars that watched over farmers, merchants, queens, nuns, and laborers still shine above us now. They witnessed countless lives that history never fully recorded. Among those lives were many women who never married. Tonight, our path follows them into later years. Not the years of youthful questions. Not the years of building reputations or establishing livelihoods, but the quieter season that came afterwards. You find yourself in a village where autumn has settled comfortably across the countryside. The harvest is nearly complete. Fields that once stood golden with grain now rest beneath pale stubble. Apples have been gathered into baskets. Firewood has been stacked carefully beside cottages in preparation for winter. The air smells of fallen leaves and distant chimney smoke. Inside one of those cottages lives Anne. She never married. Now she is old enough that children who once sat at her knee have children of their own. Time has moved steadily forward. As the morning slowly arrives, Anne rises before sunrise, as she has done for most of her life. habit often survives long after necessity fades. She wraps a warm shawl around her shoulders and opens the wooden shutters. Cold air enters the room. She breathes deeply. The world feels wonderfully quiet. Aging changed the lives of unmarried women in many different ways. For some, growing older brought increasing hardship. For others, it brought respect. Sometimes it brought both at once. History rarely offers simple answers. In many communities, older unmarried women occupied a curious place within society. They no longer stood under pressure to marry. Those questions often faded with time. Instead, something else slowly emerged. They became elders. Not always officially, not through ceremony, but through experience. Another unwritten rule quietly appeared. Share your wisdom, but do so gently. Picture yourself sitting beside Anne, near the warmth of her hearth. A kettle hangs above the fire. The scent of dried herbs fills the room. Bundles of rosemary and thyme hang from dark wooden beams overhead. Outside, frost still clings to the garden fence. A young woman from the neighboring cottage has come to visit. She seeks advice, not because Anne possesses magical knowledge, not because age guarantees wisdom, but because experience often teaches lessons that books cannot. Anne listens carefully before speaking. Perhaps this too was part of growing older, the understanding that listening can be just as valuable as answering. Many older unmarried women became trusted listeners. They had time. They had patience. They had witnessed enough joy and sorrow to understand that every problem rarely needed an immediate solution. Communities often turned to them during moments of uncertainty. Imagine how comforting that trust must have felt. For years, society may have asked why they never married. Now people came seeking guidance instead. Time quietly changed the questions. Picture yourself walking with Anne through the village later that morning. She moves more slowly than she once did. There is no shame in that. Age touches everyone who is fortunate enough to reach it. Children wave enthusiastically as she passes. A farmer pauses to ask whether she remembers the severe winter from decades earlier. She does, very clearly. Memory itself has become one of her gifts. Another unwritten expectation slowly reveals itself. Become a keeper of stories. Before photographs, before recordings, before newspapers reached every home, memory carried enormous importance. Who remembered the old boundary between two fields? Who recalled which families were related? Who remembered the flood that changed the course of the stream many years ago? Often, older people held these memories. And among them were countless unmarried women. Their stories connected generations. A grandchild might hear about a great-grandparent they had never met. A neighbor might learn how the village survived a difficult harvest long ago. These memories reminded communities that hardship could pass, that kindness should be remembered, that people belonged to something larger than themselves. As midday approaches, Anne returns home carrying only a small basket. Inside are fresh eggs given by a neighbor. She did not ask for payment. The neighbor simply wished to share. This gentle exchange reveals another quiet truth. Support often flowed in many directions. Older unmarried women frequently cared for others throughout their lives. Later, communities sometimes cared for them in return. a repaired roof, a basket of vegetables, help gathering firewood, companionship during illness. None of these gestures erased every hardship, but they remind us that mutual care has deep roots in human history. Picture yourself helping Anne prepare the midday meal. The soup is simple: barley, onions, carrots, a few herbs from the garden. The steam rises gently from the pot. The smell is comforting, ordinary, familiar. History is filled with ordinary meals. Most people who ever lived experienced far more ordinary days than extraordinary ones. Perhaps there is something peaceful in remembering that. As the afternoon light softens, Anne opens a small wooden chest. Inside rests a collection of carefully protected objects. A ribbon saved from childhood. A letter written many years earlier. A sewing needle polished smooth through decades of use. A tiny carved figure given by a beloved sibling long since gone. These objects are not valuable in the way merchants measure value, yet they hold entire lifetimes within them. Another unwritten rule quietly appears: preserve what matters. For some women, this meant preserving family heirlooms. For others, recipes, stories, skills, traditions, songs. The work of remembering was itself a gift to future generations. As evening approaches, the village begins preparing for night. Smoke rises once more from chimneys. Animals are brought into their shelters. Doors close gently against the cold. Anne lights a candle. Its soft glow fills the room. She settles into her chair beside the fire with a basket of mending resting at her feet. Even now, there is always something to repair. A loose seam, a worn cuff, a frayed blanket. Small acts of care continue until the very end of life. Perhaps that is one of the quiet lessons these women leave behind. That care itself has value. Care for homes. Care for neighbors. Care for memories. Care for traditions. Care for one another. Outside, the wind moves softly through the bare branches of autumn trees. Inside, the fire crackles gently. The room feels warm, safe, peaceful. Anne closes her eyes for a moment and simply listens. To the fire, to the wind, to the familiar sounds of a life carefully lived. And as we sit beside the hearth with her, we begin to understand something else. The unwritten rules that shaped unmarried women's lives were never the whole story. Communities created expectations. Families carried traditions. Neighbors held assumptions. Yet within those boundaries, countless women built lives of dignity, usefulness, friendship, wisdom, and quiet strength. History did not always record their names, but their influence remained. It lived on in the people they taught, the families they supported, the memories they preserved, the kindness they offered. Their lives became threads woven through the fabric of their communities, holding much more together than anyone may have realized at the time. The candle burns lower. The stars return to the sky. Another peaceful day draws gently to its end. And our journey through these quiet histories continues onward. Ahead lie stories of inheritance, legacy, and the ways unmarried women were remembered after they were gone. For now, let the warmth of the fire soften the evening. Let the wind sing softly beyond the window. And let history guide us gently into the next chapter. Morning returns once more with its familiar quiet grace. The first light spreads slowly across the countryside, touching the tops of ancient oaks before slipping gently into gardens, farmyards, and narrow streets. Dew rests upon every blade of grass, sparkling for only a few precious moments before the warmth of the sun begins to lift it away. Somewhere beyond the village, a shepherd whistles softly, and the sound drifts lazily across the fields. Imagine standing beside a winding lane lined with hedgerows. Tiny birds dart from branch to branch, searching for breakfast among the leaves. The scent of damp earth lingers after the cool night, while smoke from breakfast fires rises in thin, peaceful columns above the rooftops. Our journey today explores one of the quietest chapters in the lives of women who never married. It is the chapter that asks a simple question: what remains after a lifetime of ordinary days? History often celebrates people through monuments, portraits, and grand achievements. Yet most people left behind something far gentler. A carefully tended home, a garden that continued to bloom, a family recipe remembered for generations, a well-made blanket still warming someone many winters later. Or perhaps a story that children continued telling long after its first storyteller had fallen silent. You find yourself visiting another small village where everyone knows one another by name. At its edge stands a modest cottage surrounded by climbing roses and neatly trimmed herbs. Here lives Beatrice. She has never married. She is now well into her 70s. Her hair has turned the soft silver of early frost, and although her hands no longer move as quickly as they once did, they remain remarkably steady whenever she sows or prepares herbs gathered from her little garden. As the morning slowly arrives, Beatrice opens her gate to greet the day. She pauses, as she always does, to look across the fields. This quiet moment has become part of her morning for so many years that she scarcely thinks about it anymore. The seasons have changed before this view thousands of times. Spring blossoms, summer harvests, autumn leaves, winter snow. The fields have never remained the same for very long. Perhaps life itself is much the same. One of the unwritten truths that often accompanied later life was this: a person's legacy was measured less by possessions than by remembrance. In many villages, older unmarried women owned only a modest number of belongings. A sturdy table, a well-used spinning wheel, several wooden bowls, a carefully repaired chest, a few treasured books if they were fortunate enough to own them, bundles of herbs hanging from ceiling beams. Simple objects, yet each carried years of quiet care. Picture yourself stepping inside Beatrice's cottage. Morning sunlight enters through the small window, falling across polished wooden furniture. Everything has its place. The room smells faintly of beeswax, lavender, and freshly baked oat bread cooling upon the table. Nothing appears expensive. Everything appears loved. History often teaches us that people found dignity not only through wealth, but through careful stewardship of what little they possessed. A repaired chair might serve 3 generations. A wool blanket could last decades with proper care. Nothing useful was discarded without thought. Another unwritten rule slowly reveals itself: leave things better than you found them. This quiet principle shaped many ordinary lives. a garden planted for those who would harvest after you, a roof repaired before winter so others would remain warm, a skill patiently taught before old age made teaching more difficult. These small acts reached into the future. Imagine a young neighbor arriving just after breakfast. Her name is Edith. She has recently begun keeping her own household after marrying the previous year. Today, she carries a loaf of fresh bread, still warm from the oven. She has not come only to deliver bread. She has come to learn. Beatrice smiles warmly and invites her inside. Soon, the two women stand together beside a wooden table covered with bundles of dried herbs. "This one," Beatrice says gently, lifting a sprig of rosemary, "keeps its fragrance even through the coldest winter if you dry it patiently." Edith listens carefully. She asks questions. Sometimes she laughs softly when she makes a mistake tying the herbs together. Beatrice simply begins again. Patiently. History was often preserved in moments exactly like these. Not through speeches, not through ceremonies, but through one person, quietly showing another how something had always been done. Another unwritten expectation appears before us. Teach without expecting reward. Many unmarried women became generous teachers, not because anyone required it, because knowledge shared freely strengthened the whole community. How to store apples so they lasted longer. How to spin stronger thread. How to recognize the first signs of approaching frost. How to comfort someone grieving. These lessons had no price. Yet they were priceless. As midday approaches, several children gather outside the cottage. They know Beatrice always keeps a basket of smooth pebbles collected from the nearby stream. She enjoys telling stories while the children arrange the stones into tiny villages upon the ground. One stone becomes a church, another a mill, another a cottage. The children listen as she describes how the village looked when she herself was their age. She speaks of old neighbors whose names are almost forgotten now. Of an enormous oak tree that once stood beside the road before a great storm brought it down. Of winters when snow covered the fields so deeply that fences disappeared beneath white drifts. The children stare with wide eyes. Whether they remember every detail hardly matters. They will remember her voice, her kindness, the feeling of sitting safely beside her on a peaceful afternoon. Sometimes, memories survive through feelings as much as facts. Picture yourself walking through the village during the afternoon. Beatrice moves slowly now. A walking stick helps steady her steps across uneven ground. Neighbors greet her warmly. The blacksmith pauses from his work to ask how she is feeling. The baker slips an extra roll into her basket without mentioning payment. A farmer offers to mend her garden fence before winter arrives. These quiet gestures remind us that respect earned across many years often returned in unexpected ways. Not everyone experienced such support. History also tells us of older women who struggled with loneliness, illness, or poverty. Some depended upon relatives. Others relied upon charitable institutions or parish support. Life remained uncertain for many people, regardless of whether they married. Yet where strong community ties existed, kindness often softened difficult seasons. As the afternoon light grows softer, Beatrice returns home. She opens a small wooden box, tucked carefully inside her cupboard. Within it rests a handful of precious keepsakes, a tiny silver brooch inherited from her mother, a folded letter written by a brother who traveled far away in his youth, a ribbon from a harvest festival many decades earlier, a pair of spectacles carefully wrapped in linen. These objects speak quietly, not of great historical events, but of one human life. Another unwritten rule gently reveals itself. Remember those who came before you. Memory gave people a sense of belonging. Family stories reminded children that they were part of something stretching far beyond their own lifetime. Older unmarried women often became the guardians of these stories. Without them, many names might have disappeared forever. As evening slowly approaches, the sky turns warm shades of amber and pale crimson. A cool breeze carries the scent of fallen leaves across the fields. The day's work is nearly complete. Beatrice lights a single candle. Its gentle glow dances across the familiar room. She settles into her favorite chair, with a basket of knitting resting beside her. Outside, the village gradually grows quiet. The blacksmith's hammer falls silent. The mill wheel continues turning softly in the distance. Somewhere beyond the cottages, an owl begins its evening call. The peaceful rhythm of another ordinary day comes gently to rest. As we sit beside the warm fire, listening to the comforting crackle of burning wood, we begin to understand that the true legacy of many unmarried women was never written in stone. It lived instead in careful hands that taught others, in patient hearts that welcomed neighbors, in homes filled with quiet order, in gardens lovingly tended, in traditions faithfully remembered, and in countless acts of kindness that spread outward through families and communities long after their own footsteps had faded. Our gentle journey is far from over. Ahead, we will explore how different cultures, changing centuries, and shifting ideas slowly transformed society's expectations of women who never married, revealing that even unwritten rules are never permanent. For now, let the candle burn softly beside the window. Let the evening breeze whisper through the garden, and let the peaceful voices of the past carry you gently into the next chapter of our journey. The night has become wonderfully still. The last candle burns with a small, steady flame, casting gentle patterns of light across old wooden beams that have watched over this quiet home for longer than anyone can remember. Outside, the wind moves softly through the branches of ancient trees. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl calls once before silence settles over the countryside again. Imagine sitting beside the fire one final time. There is nowhere else to hurry, no journey left to rush. Only a peaceful moment to reflect upon the many women whose footsteps have quietly guided us through these centuries. We have walked beside farmers before sunrise, merchants opening their workshops, skilled seamstresses carefully measuring cloth, sisters tending herb gardens inside convent walls, elderly neighbors preserving stories, and patient teachers passing practical wisdom from one generation to the next. None of these women became famous. Most left behind no portraits. Few appeared in official histories. Yet together, they formed an essential part of the communities in which they lived. As our journey gently draws toward its close, one final unwritten rule slowly comes into view. Leave the world a little kinder than you found it. No law demanded such a thing. No village council carved those words into stone. Yet countless ordinary lives quietly reflected that principle. A loaf of bread shared during a difficult winter, a blanket stitched for a child, an elderly neighbor visited during illness, seeds saved for the following spring, a frightened apprentice encouraged instead of criticized. Small kindnesses, almost invisible on their own. Together they became the quiet foundation upon which communities endured. History often teaches us about kings whose decisions altered kingdoms, or generals whose victories changed borders. Those stories certainly matter. But history is also made inside kitchens where bread was baked before dawn, inside gardens where herbs were carefully tended, inside workshops where patient hands repaired clothing that would keep someone warm through another winter, inside cottages where stories were told beside evening fires until children carried them into adulthood. The women we have met lived within expectations that they did not always choose. Marriage remained the expected path throughout much of medieval and early modern Europe. Families hoped for it. Neighbors assumed it. Religious teachings generally encouraged it. Communities often organized daily life around households led by married couples. When a woman remained unmarried, whether by personal choice, circumstance, economic reality, religious vocation, or simple chance, she frequently found herself navigating customs that existed more in people's minds than in written law. Some of those customs offered security, others limited opportunity. Some reflected genuine concern, others reflected misunderstanding. Many changed from one century to another, and from one village to the next. History reminds us to be careful about broad conclusions. There was never one single experience shared by every unmarried woman. A merchant's daughter in a thriving town lived differently from a shepherd's daughter in the mountains. A noblewoman inherited different responsibilities than a village spinner. A nun inside a convent followed customs unlike those of a market trader. Even neighboring communities sometimes expected different things. Human societies have always been wonderfully complicated. Perhaps that is one of history's gentlest lessons. Whenever we imagine that everyone lived exactly the same way, the evidence quietly invites us to look again. Imagine walking once more through every place we have visited together. The peaceful village where dawn arrived with birdsong and wood smoke. The bustling market square filled with honest trade and familiar faces. The herb garden where lavender swayed gently in the breeze. The convent library where careful hands preserved books for future generations. The small cottage where an elderly woman remembered stories almost forgotten by everyone else. Each place remains quiet now. The people have gone. The buildings may no longer stand. The gardens may have returned to the earth. Yet traces remain. Archaeologists uncover worn, spinning whorls. Historians study faded wills and household accounts. Letters survive inside dusty archives. Parish records quietly preserve names that might otherwise have disappeared forever. Sometimes, only a single line remains. Alice, spinster. Margaret, daughter. Joan, servant. Catherine, sister. A few words, nothing more. Yet behind each brief record stretched an entire lifetime. There were ordinary mornings, unexpected joys, private disappointments, friendships, hard work, laughter, moments of loneliness, acts of generosity witnessed by only a handful of people, lives every bit as rich and complex as our own. Perhaps the greatest unwritten rule of all belonged not to the women themselves, but to history. History remembered only a few. The rest quietly disappeared. Yet disappearing from written records is not the same as living an unimportant life. The woman who patiently taught 5 children to read changed 5 futures. The woman who preserved seeds after a failed harvest helped feed families the following year. The woman who cared for aging parents offered a kindness that no official document could fully measure. The woman who comforted neighbors during illness left memories carried not in books, but in grateful hearts. History is filled with invisible architects. They built not castles, but communities, not empires, but belonging. As the evening grows quieter, let us also remember that many ideas about unmarried women have continued to change over time. The 18th century differed from the 15th. The 19th differed from both. Industrialization reshaped work. Education slowly became more accessible. Women's legal rights gradually changed in many countries over the centuries. Expectations that once seemed permanent slowly shifted. What one generation accepted without question, another began to reconsider. The unwritten rules were never truly fixed. Like rivers, they slowly changed their course. And perhaps they always will. Picture yourself standing one last time beneath a clear night sky. The stars shine with the same quiet beauty they offered to those women centuries ago. Somewhere beneath those stars, a spinner once finished her final thread before sleep. A nun quietly closed a cherished manuscript. A merchant carefully locked her workshop. An elderly aunt tucked a blanket around a sleeping child. A gardener gathered herbs before the first frost. None of them knew that hundreds of years later, strangers would wonder about their lives. None imagined that their ordinary days might one day become history. Yet here we are, listening, remembering, walking gently beside them. Perhaps that is one of the greatest gifts history can offer. Not simply facts and dates, but understanding. The quiet recognition that people separated by centuries often hoped for many of the same things. A safe home, meaningful work, trusted friends, good health, enough food for winter, a little peace at the end of the day, and the comfort of knowing they had been kind whenever they could. The fire beside us has burned low now. Only glowing embers remain, their gentle warmth filling the room with a peaceful glow. Outside, the wind has become softer still. The village sleeps. The marketplace is silent. The convent bell will not ring again until morning. The fields rest beneath the moonlight, just as they have through countless generations. Our long journey through the quiet lives of women who never married has reached its gentle end. Their stories remind us that a history is not only shaped by those whose names fill books, it is also shaped by the countless ordinary people whose patience, skill, generosity, and quiet resilience held families together, strengthened neighborhoods, preserved traditions, and carried communities through ordinary days and difficult seasons alike. May their forgotten footsteps continue to remind us that a meaningful life has never depended solely upon fame, wealth, or recognition. Sometimes, the greatest legacy is simply the kindness we leave behind, the wisdom we quietly share, and the gentle difference we make in the lives of others. As the last ember slowly fades, and the first hints of another dawn wait patiently beyond the horizon, our peaceful walk through history comes to rest. And with that final quiet moment, the story gently closes.